You know that moment when your whole world changes and it hits you like a ton of bricks? Well, I had one of those moments, and it came from the very people I trusted most, my family. Imagine this. I'd spent years building something with my blood, sweat, and tears. I thought it was my future, my legacy. But one day, in the middle of a regular family meeting, my dad looked me in the eye and said, "You're no longer part of this business." Just like that. It wasn't just a harsh blow, it was a betrayal. And let me tell you, the feeling of getting kicked out of the family business was like nothing I'd ever experienced. But that was the beginning of my true journey. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here. And hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. My name is Sophie Turner, and at the time this all went down, I was 36 years old. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, a place where everyone knew everyone's business before you even had a chance to make a name for yourself. My family owned a bakery, Turner's Sweets, and it was kind of a local legend. My mom, Linda, ran the kitchen, my dad, Frank, handled the finances, and my two older brothers, Mark and James, were in charge of the shop's day-to-day operations. It was a small business, sure, but it was ours. And it felt like it had been there forever, like it was a part of our family's DNA. From the time I was a little girl, I'd been a part of that bakery. I'd spend weekends helping my mom frost cakes, decorate cookies, or just sit in the corner watching the world pass by through the bakery's big front window. As I grew older, my responsibilities grew too. By the time I was in my 20s, I wasn't just baking. I was managing the store's finances, organizing the inventory, and finding new ways to attract customers. I had big ideas, but in a way, I felt like the odd one out. My family was traditional, rooted in the past, sticking to the same recipes and old-school ways of doing things. I could see the future, and maybe, just maybe, that was the problem. I wasn't like my brothers who were content to keep things the way they were. I wanted more. I wanted to bring the bakery into the digital age, build an online presence, expand beyond our small town. But there was a problem. My family just wasn't ready for that kind of change. I thought they'd come around, that they'd see my vision. But instead, I became the black sheep of the family. Little did I know that would be the beginning of a much bigger transformation, one that would change everything. It all came to a head one morning during what was supposed to be a simple family meeting at the bakery. We were sitting around the big oak table in the back office, the smell of freshly baked bread hanging in the air. I had just pitched my latest idea, launching an online store, selling our famous pastries nationwide, and using social media to really grow our brand. It was a big shift, but I knew it was the future. My brothers looked at me like I had just suggested we start selling pet rocks. My dad, Frank, though, he didn't even try to hide his disappointment. He said, "This isn't the direction I envisioned for this business, Sophie. We don't need gimmicks." I tried to argue, but it was like talking to a wall. And then, just like that, he dropped the bomb. "You're out," he said, as if it was nothing. My heart sank, kicked out of my own family's business. I wish I could say I handled that moment with grace, but I didn't. One minute I was sitting there, listening to my father's voice, trying to process what was happening. The next, I was walking out of that bakery like I had just been hit by a freight train. It was surreal. I had spent years pouring my heart into that place, late nights baking, organizing, fixing problems no one knew about, and now, just like that, I was being tossed aside. No warning, no second chance, just out. I spent the next few days in a fog. I didn't want to talk to anyone, least of all my family. Mark and James didn't even bother to reach out. They probably didn't care. Hell, I was the troublemaker who'd always wanted more than the bakery could give. But my mom, she was different. She was the heart of that place. I thought maybe she'd say something, maybe she'd understand my vision. Instead, I caught her one night sitting on the back porch, quietly watching the sunset. When she saw me, she just nodded, as if she'd already known this was coming. "You'll figure it out," she said, her voice steady but sad. "You always do." That's when it hit me. My family wasn't going to change. Not for me, not for anyone. They were stuck in the past, and I was the one who had to move forward. But what was I supposed to do now? I had no backup plan, no investors. Hell, I didn't even have a strong enough social media following to make this work. I was starting from scratch. I tried calling around to other bakeries looking for work, but the word had spread fast. Sophie Turner. The one who got kicked out of Turner's Sweets. They'd hang up before I could even pitch myself. I felt like an outcast, a failure. My dad had always warned me about the dangers of going against the grain, of thinking I was smarter than the family business. You can't build empires on ideas, Sophie, he'd say. You need solid, real-world work ethic. And here I was, proving him right, or at least that's what I thought at the time. But then something unexpected happened. It wasn't much, but it was enough to spark a glimmer of hope. I got a message on Instagram from a local coffee shop in a neighboring town. They had seen my posts about experimenting with new pastries, and they wanted to try selling my goods. It wasn't a huge deal, just a small order for a couple of dozen cookies. But in that moment, I felt like the weight of the world had shifted just a little bit. Someone believed in me. And for the first time since that meeting, I thought maybe this could work. That small order turned into a bigger one. Then, another. Slowly, very slowly, I began to build something of my own. It wasn't much, just me, a borrowed kitchen and some late-night baking sessions, but it was mine. And it felt good. It wasn't the family bakery, but it was a start. I thought that small order from the coffee shop would be the beginning of my comeback. I mean, it was a step in the right direction, right? A little win. Something I could build on. But what I didn't anticipate was how hard it would be to make even the smallest dent in the world I was trying to break into. At first, it felt like everything was stacked against me. I didn't have the same kind of budget my family's bakery had. I wasn't backed by years of tradition or a loyal customer base. I had no name behind me, no reputation, just a dream and a whole lot of frosting. I started by selling my baked goods online, Instagram, Facebook, and Etsy. I spent hours researching how to optimize posts, what hashtags to use, how to make the perfect flat lay of cookies that would make people's mouths water just by looking at it. It felt so foreign to me. I was used to a face-to-face business model, one where people could come into the store, smell the bread baking, and feel the warmth of the kitchen. I thought I could translate that magic to the digital world, but it wasn't that simple. The first few weeks were rough. I posted constantly, sometimes twice a day, offering discounts, running promotions, and showing behind-the-scenes shots of me baking in my cramped apartment kitchen. But the orders didn't flood in. They trickled in, and I mean trickled. I'd get one or two here and there, but it wasn't enough to keep me going. Each time I'd get an order, I felt a glimmer of hope, but it was always followed by a wave of doubt. Was it just a fluke? Would anyone care about my cookies tomorrow? Then there was the packaging. I had no experience with shipping and packaging. My family's bakery was local, so we never had to worry about shipping to customers across the country. I had to learn on the fly how to package everything in a way that wouldn't leave people receiving smashed pastries or cookies with broken edges. The worst part? It felt like the world was watching, waiting for me to fail. You can't ignore the whispers in a small town. When I ran into people who had once been customers at Turner's Sweets, they'd smile politely, but I could tell they were judging me. "How's the bakery doing, Sophie?" they'd ask, the edge in their voice barely disguised. I hated it. They wanted me to fail. They wanted to see me crumble because I had stepped away from the family business, from the thing they thought I should have stuck with. I can't tell you how many times I found myself standing in front of my oven at 3 a.m., covered in flour, feeling like I was losing my mind. I'd burn a batch of cookies or accidentally overmix the dough for my famous cinnamon rolls. I'd have to throw it all out and start again. Sometimes I'd look at my little business and wonder if it was all worth it. Maybe my dad had been right, maybe I was in over my head. But then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, a miracle happened. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. One of my posts caught the attention of a food blogger from New York City. I still remember the message like it was yesterday. "I love what you're doing with your cookies. Would you be interested in sending me a sample for a review?" My heart leaped into my throat. A real food blogger, from New York, what were the odds? I sent her a care package filled with my best-selling treats. Chocolate chip cookies, lemon bars, and some of my personal favorites that I'd been experimenting with. A few days later, she posted a glowing review. She raved about how fresh everything tasted, how unique the flavors were. The orders started to come in faster after that, and for the first time since I'd been kicked out, I felt like I was doing something right. But here's the thing. Just as I thought I was starting to gain momentum, I ran into another roadblock. With all these new orders, I quickly realized that the one-person show I had set up wasn't sustainable. I was overwhelmed, overworked, and constantly behind. I needed help, but I didn't have the resources to hire anyone. I was still living in my tiny apartment, trying to make the most out of my limited space. Every part of me was stretched to its limits. My kitchen was becoming a disaster zone. The counters were piled high with baking sheets and mixing bowls, and there was never enough room to store all the ingredients I needed. I was trying to juggle the logistics of shipping, handling customer service, and still making sure each order was perfect. I could feel the stress building up, but I couldn't afford to slow down. Every order I filled was a tiny step toward proving myself, toward building something bigger than the family bakery I'd been kicked out of. The reality of running a business on my own was hitting me harder than I ever imagined. I wanted to succeed so badly, but I had to face the fact that running an empire, no matter how small, wasn't just about baking a few cookies and taking a cute picture. The pressure was building up. Orders for my signature collection were pouring in, and while that should have felt like a victory, it felt like the universe was throwing obstacles in my path just to see if I'd crack. I was starting to realize that running a business, especially one I built from scratch, wasn't about the glamorous side of entrepreneurship, it was about the grind. The endless, soul-draining grind. One evening, I was elbow-deep in dough, trying to perfect my new batch of caramel pecan cookies when I got a text from my old friend Rachel. Rachel had a knack for checking in at the most inconvenient times. "Hey, Soph. How's the bakery? You still baking those luxury cookies?" I wiped my hands on my apron and picked up the phone. "Luxury cookies, Rachel," I said, half laughing. "I'm drowning in butter and sugar, barely keeping up. I need a miracle at this point." Rachel's response was as predictable as ever. "Oh, come on, you're probably just too stressed. You should really learn to delegate, or hire someone to help. Seriously, how hard can it be to find an assistant?" I stared at the screen, letting her words sink in. An assistant? That was the problem. I didn't have money to hire anyone. If I did, I'd barely break even. Plus, it wasn't like I had a team of experienced bakers standing by. "Rachel," I muttered, "I can barely afford to buy the ingredients, let alone hire anyone." She ignored the sarcasm, launching into her usual spiel. "I've heard you can make a fortune selling high-end cookies, though. You should start offering them as exclusive items. Market them like you're a fancy chef. Charge people more, people love that stuff." I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh sure, because I'm just bursting with extra cash to make premium cookies for rich people." Rachel didn't get it, but something about her suggestion lingered in my mind. Premium cookies, people did love exclusive products. Maybe I was overthinking things. I had to differentiate myself from the flood of other bakeries. But how could I make a cookie exclusive? It hit me like a sugar rush. I decided to bake something completely unique, ingredients no one else was using in their baked goods. I tried matcha powder, sea salt caramel, and for kicks, I even threw in a bit of gold leaf to make it look fancy. I rebranded the whole line, Sophie's Signature Collection, limited edition only. I updated my website, made new Instagram posts with crisp pictures of my creations, and launched it with a countdown. The results? Absolutely shocking. The first batch sold out within hours. People loved the idea of having a luxury product, even if it was just cookies, and the orders kept coming. I was baking nonstop, 12-hour days running on caffeine and sugar. It felt like I was finally making headway. Maybe Rachel had been right after all, but then came the inevitable. I didn't have enough room to bake this much. My kitchen, which had once seemed spacious, was now overwhelmed with packaging materials, baking supplies, and stacks of orders. I could barely move in there. The oven was running nonstop, and I had to stay on top of deliveries, customer complaints, and social media all at the same time. It wasn't long before I hit a breaking point. One night, while I was struggling to stuff boxes with cookies I'd just finished baking, my phone rang. I was half expecting it to be my old family business. Turns out it was even worse. My dad. "Hey, Sophie," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "I've been keeping an eye on your little operation. Looks like you've been doing well. So what do you think about coming back? Maybe help Turner's Sweets expand. We could use your ideas." I had to stop myself from laughing. "Are you serious?" I snapped. "You kicked me out, remember, and now suddenly you want me to come back and save your sinking ship." There was a pause on the other end. "I just think there's a way we can both benefit from each other's success. You bring in the new customers, and we'll handle the bakery the way it's always been done." "Yeah, no thanks, Dad. I was done with the family business. The way I saw it, I wasn't going to be the backup plan for a company that had thrown me out. I've got my own empire to build." I hung up, but his words lingered. My old bakery, the one I grew up in, was starting to feel like a distant memory. I was carving my own path now, no looking back. and as much as I resented the way they treated me, I knew I'd never go back. I had my own vision, and it was clear to me now, this was my chance to make it. I wasn't just building a business, I was building something that was truly mine. I'd barely recovered from the excitement of launching the signature collection when the reality of running a business alone came crashing down. It wasn't all sweet cookie profits and glowing reviews. No, I quickly learned that success brings its own set of problems, and not all of them are easily solved. The first issue was the scale of things. My tiny apartment kitchen, which had once been the perfect, cozy spot for baking, now felt like a war zone. There were flour-covered counters, overflowing mixing bowls, and not an inch of free space to breathe, let alone move. Every night, I'd stay up late baking batches of cookies, packaging them in gift boxes, and running out to drop them off at the post office. My neighbors, who had once admired my passion for baking, now gave me sympathetic glances, as if they were watching a ticking time bomb. The orders kept coming, more and more every day, and I couldn't keep up. By the time I would finish a batch, I'd be swamped with another. It was like a never-ending treadmill. No matter how much I hustled, I could never stay ahead. My hands were raw from packaging, and the lack of sleep started to take its toll. I began making mistakes, forgotten orders, damaged cookies, and angry emails from customers who had paid a premium price and expected perfection. One evening, after working a 14-hour day, I got a complaint. "Your cookies arrived in pieces," it said. Very disappointing. I thought I was getting an exclusive product. I stared at the email, my heart sinking. The last thing I wanted was a disappointed customer, especially after working so hard to build something I was proud of. I spent the next hour crafting the perfect apology, reassuring them that I would fix the issue, giving them a refund, and offering a free box of cookies on their next order. But it wasn't the refund that stung. It was the feeling that I was failing despite all the effort. As if that wasn't enough, I got a text from Rachel the next day. "So, I saw that your bakery's doing really well. But did you know Turner's Sweets launched their own luxury cookies?" she asked, her tone light but with an edge of concern. I froze. My old family bakery, the one I had been kicked out of. "They're copying me," I typed back. My fingers were shaking. "I mean, not exactly," Rachel replied. "But yeah, they've got a limited edition line now, pretty much the same idea, don't you think?" I couldn't believe it. Turner's Sweets had always been known for its traditional bakery products, and now they were copying my idea. I was furious. But more than that, I felt betrayed. This was my thing, the signature collection, the idea that had helped me stand out. And now my old family business was using the same marketing tricks to steal my thunder. The worst part. They had a massive following, years of loyal customers, and a reputation I couldn't compete with. I was the underdog, but they were the giants, with all the resources they needed to crush me. It was at that point that I began to lose my confidence. Was I just another flash-in-the-pan entrepreneur trying to make it in an overcrowded market? Was it even worth the stress, the sleepless nights, and the constant battle against bigger, better-funded competitors? I needed help, and not just in the kitchen. I called my mom, hoping for some reassurance, but instead she just told me something that hit harder than anything else. "Maybe you should try to collaborate with Turner's Sweets. They're your family after all." "Are you serious?" I said, feeling the frustration build up. "After everything that happened, you think I should go back to them? They kicked me out, remember? They didn't believe in me when I had ideas, and now they want to cash in on what I've built." My mom's voice softened, but she still sounded unsure. "I just think you're working so hard, Sophie, maybe. Just maybe you could help each other." But that was the problem. They didn't deserve my help. They had never seen me as more than just the family member, a cog in their machine. I wasn't their backup plan, and I wasn't going to be their savior. I had my own empire to build. I hung up, stewing in my anger. The competitive pressure from Turner's Sweets was one thing, but the constant doubts creeping in from my family, that was something I couldn't shake. By the end of the week, I was drained. I was working harder than ever, but feeling more overwhelmed than I ever had before. I couldn't keep up with the orders. I couldn't keep my kitchen clean. I was falling behind, and every new setback made me wonder if this was the end. But in the midst of all this chaos, I realized something important. I had a story, my story, and it was what made me different. Sure, Turner's Sweets had more resources. But they didn't have me, the girl who was kicked out of her own family business and was still standing tall, fighting to prove everyone wrong. It was time to stop running in circles and start running my own race. I wasn't going to let anyone take away the empire I was building, not my family, not a competitor, not even my own doubts. If I had to go through this mess to prove that I could make it, then so be it. I was going to fight harder than I ever had before. Because this time, the story was mine and no one else could write it. Just when I thought I was finally catching my breath after dealing with the orders and competition, a message popped up on my phone that sent everything into chaos. I had barely finished a batch of chocolate chip cookies when I saw the subject line in the email. Exclusive opportunity, immediate response needed. I opened it thinking it was another pitch from a supplier or some random newsletter. But this time, it wasn't. It was an email from one of the biggest department stores in the country. They had seen my signature collection cookies and were interested in offering them in their stores nationwide. This wasn't just a small deal, it was massive, a real game changer. But there was a catch. They wanted to meet with me. And I had less than a week to get my act together. Panic set in. I hadn't even thought about scaling my business. My kitchen was already bursting with ingredients and packaging materials, the logistics of handling national orders. I had no clue how to pull that off, and I certainly didn't have the staff or the infrastructure to fulfill this kind of deal. I put my phone down and stared at the wall, my mind racing. How was I going to pull this off? I didn't have the funds to hire extra help. I didn't have a large operation. Hell, I could barely keep up with the local orders. The whole thing seemed impossible. But then, like a light bulb flashing on in my mind, something clicked. I wasn't going to let this opportunity slip by because of fear or doubt. I remembered the advice Rachel had given me. You've got to stop acting like a hobbyist and start acting like a CEO. It had sounded like a joke at the time, but now I realized she was right. I needed to shift my mindset. I wasn't just baking cookies in my kitchen anymore, I was building a business. So I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I reached out to a logistics company to help with shipping. I contacted packaging suppliers who could ensure my cookies would arrive in perfect condition. And I even found a small local bakery willing to help with some of the production. It was still a huge leap, but I felt a fire burning inside me that I hadn't felt before. The night before my meeting, I went over every detail, from my business plan to my vision for the brand. I was ready, at least I thought I was. Then, just when I thought I had it all figured out, the universe threw me one more curveball. Another email popped up, this time from my father. Let's talk. I've been hearing good things. Maybe we should meet. I couldn't believe it. My father. The same man who had told me I was out of the family business only a year ago. The man who had dismissed my ideas as too risky, too modern. He wanted to meet now. After I had done everything on my own, I knew what he was up to. He had seen the success of my signature collection and now wanted to come crawling back, hoping I'd somehow be willing to partner with Turner's Sweets. But I wasn't about to go back to the bakery where they had kicked me out. I wasn't going to let them take credit for something I had built from the ground up. I called Rachel. You won't believe this, I said, still in shock. My dad wants to meet. He says he's heard good things about my business. I know what he wants. He wants me to save their sinking bakery. Rachel's voice was calm, almost amused. Well, of course he does. They see you succeeding and now they want in. Don't let them use your success to fix their mistakes. This is your time, Sophie. You've built something on your own. I took a deep breath. Rachel was right. My dad didn't deserve a place in my business anymore. I had come this far by myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone pull me back into that toxic dynamic. The next morning, I walked into the meeting with the department store buyer feeling more confident than I had in weeks. I walked out of there with a deal on the table, not just for cookies, but for a nationwide partnership. This was it. My business was about to go national, but that wasn't the end of it. No, the real twist came a few hours later when I called my father back. I'm not coming back, Dad, I said, my voice steady. I'm building something bigger than you ever thought possible. I don't need your help, I've already made it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer than I expected. I've been wrong, Sophie. You've done something I didn't believe you could. And in that moment, something shifted. I didn't need their approval. I had built this empire on my own, and now, finally, I was in control of my future. The weight of everything finally caught up with me. The deal with the department store had gone through, and I was officially in over my head. My business was growing, yes, but I couldn't breathe. I was drowning in orders, juggling logistics, and barely managing to stay ahead. Every day felt like a race I was losing. It was late one evening when the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My kitchen, the place where I'd started it all, was now a battleground. The floor was covered in flour, boxes stacked high in every corner and every surface cluttered with packaging materials. There was no room to move. I hadn't seen my friends in weeks, barely even had time to sleep, and my health was suffering. I was stressed, tired, and mentally exhausted. Then, as if to add salt to the wound, I received an email from the department store. A shipment had been delayed due to a packaging error. "Your cookies didn't make it in time for the launch," the email said. "We need to fix this immediately if you want to keep this partnership." I sat down at my desk, staring at the screen in disbelief. This was the kind of mistake I couldn't afford. This was my shot at a national presence, and I was blowing it. The weight of failure, of disappointing not only myself but my customers and the store, crashed over me. I couldn't fix it alone. I realized for the first time that I was running a business, not just baking for fun. The stakes were real, and my passion alone wasn't enough to keep things afloat. I needed help. It was one of those rare moments when pride has to take a backseat to reality. I knew I had to ask for help, something I hadn't been willing to do for so long. But who could I turn to? I needed more than just an extra pair of hands. I needed a team, a support system, and fast. I picked up the phone and called the logistics company. I called a few trusted people in my network for advice. But the most important call came when I reached out to a friend from my college days, someone who had experience running a business. She listened, and then she said something that stuck. "Sophie, it's time to scale. You can't do this alone, but you can get the right people around you to make this work." I sat back in my chair, realizing she was right. The crisis wasn't just a moment of failure, it was the turning point I needed to grow. It was time to stop trying to be everything to everyone and start building a real business. I didn't need to do this alone anymore. And that right there was the first step toward the resolution I so desperately needed. I made the decision to scale. I couldn't do it all on my own anymore. That was the key to saving my business and myself. Over the next few weeks, I brought in a small team. Someone to handle customer service, a part-time baker to help with production, and an expert in logistics who helped streamline the shipping process. It was a gamble, but one I had to take. With the support I needed, things started to fall into place. I wasn't just reacting to crises anymore, I was actively shaping my business. I focused on building systems, delegating tasks, and putting the right processes in place to meet the demand. Slowly but surely, the chaos started to settle, and for the first time in months I could breathe. The department store partnership flourished. My signature collection cookies became a huge hit and orders skyrocketed, but it wasn't just about the cookies anymore. It was about building a brand, something that had started from my kitchen and grown into something real. I had turned my crisis into an opportunity, and my business was stronger for it. Looking back, I realized that the crisis had been the best thing to happen to me. It forced me to ask for help, to grow, and to finally step into the role of a true business owner. I wasn't just a baker anymore. I was a CEO building an empire, and that's when everything truly changed. As I looked around my new office space, a small but sleek room filled with bright white walls and a tidy desk, it hit me just how far I'd come. A year ago, I was baking cookies in my cramped apartment, struggling to stay afloat. Now my business was booming, and I had a team that supported me. I had a long way to go before I could call myself a big success, but I was finally on the right path. The department store deal was just the beginning. I had expanded my line, launching new products, cakes, brownies, even gluten-free options, and my brand had a loyal following. I'd learned to trust my instincts, and even more, I'd learned to trust others. I wasn't doing this alone anymore. And then, as if to seal the deal, my father called me one afternoon. I just wanted to say, "I've been wrong," he said, his voice heavy with something I hadn't heard from him in years, respect. "You've built something impressive, Sophie, I'm proud of you." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. All the years of struggle, rejection, and feeling like I didn't belong in the family business came rushing back. But in that moment, it didn't matter. I had built my own empire on my terms. "I don't need your approval anymore, Dad," I said, the words feeling strangely freeing. "I'm exactly where I need to be." And with that, I hung up, smiling to myself. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I had already succeeded.